All right, let's clear the air on splitboard boot setups. So on my right here, I got my hard boot setup. On my left, I got my soft boot setup. I want to talk about uphill experience on both setups, downhill experience on both setups, a little bit about why you might choose one or the other, and then a little bit about my experience and how being on the different setups has changed in my riding. So, my experience coming from this started splitboarding when I was 18. I've got like 13 years of splitboarding under my belt. Most of those years, the first 6 or 7, all soft boots. Around 2020, 2021, I switched to hard boots. Was on hard boots pretty exclusively until last season. Started soft booting again, and I've kind of gone back and forth a bit since last season. But at this point, I'm pretty much on my soft boots full time. So I've got quite a bit of experience on both ends of them. I'm splitting like 100 days a year, working as a guide, and so spending a lot of time on this equipment as well. So let's start with the uphill experience. So 90% of our time on our splitboard is spent walking uphill. But I would argue the reason we walk uphill is to ride down it. If the goal is just to walk uphill, you wouldn't carry 15 to 20 pounds of snowboard gear up the mountain with you. Like, you want to ride down. But knowing that we spend a lot of our day in our boots walking, let's talk about the uphill experience. So let's start with the hard boots, because this is why people get hard boots, is for the uphill experience. So why is the uphill experience better on hard boots? One, the weight per foot is lighter with a hard boot setup. And that's weight per foot. That's not necessarily total board weight, like once the bindings are on and everything. And so because the bindings here go in your backpack while you're touring up, that weight's not on your foot. And, you know, there's that whole idea that a pound on the foot is like 5 on the back, whatever. I've been hearing that forever. I've never actually read the study that claims that to be true or not, but it's nice when things feel light underfoot. So the weight, huge benefit. The articulating cuff, large range of motion there, quite comfortable. It feels almost like you're walking in a pair of trail running shoes, which is great. The tech toe inserts, so where this boot articulates like that is quite a nice natural stride from your foot, which is also comfortable as well. Some people will say that it has better lateral stability for edging or side hilling across the skin track, which I would generally agree with, although I think it's overstated a little bit. But because the boot is more laterally stiff, you have more ability to tip the ski over and get a higher edge angle and get better edge hold. At the end of the day, you're still on a split board. And the reason split boards suck at side hilling is because they're so wide, and a split ski is much softer than a normal ski. So the softness, the width, and to some extent the reduced effective edge length of a split board is just going to make side hilling more challenging, and you're never going to be able, even with a hard boot setup, to side hill quite as easily as you would on a pair of skis. I do ski as well, prefer snowboarding as my daily ride, but I do ski, I ski tour, and you know, even though you're maybe like not slipping in the same parts as your ski buddies are, if you've never been on a pair of skis in a skin track before, the skier is working not nearly as hard as you almost every single time. So split boards are just kind of tough, you know. Again, if you're in it for the uphill, you probably shouldn't even like be on a split board at all, to some extent. Although that being said, like for me, the uphill experience is part of it too, so I get it. So that's pretty much it with the hard boot. Oh, and crampon compatibility. So you got a stiff sole here, and you've got a toe and heel welts. You can put whatever crampon you want on these. It's going to hold totally fine and feel quite good. If you're into ice climbing or anything like that, it's not as sensitive as a mountaineering boot, but you can climb quite well with these. So uphill, big advantages there. For the soft boot, uphill. This is a Splitboard specific soft boot, the Nitro Vertical. This is actually my first Splitboard specific soft boot. For all the years that I soft booted, I mostly was on just like normal resort soft boots, but I tended to lean towards burlier, more responsive soft boots anyway, so they usually have like a good sole and stuff. But with this uphill experience, this boot is pretty heavy in order to have this like big burly sole on here. There's just weight that's got to be added, especially to like add this walk mode and stuff. So it's definitely heavier. As walk mode goes, there's like this little thing here that's held in by the lacing system. If the laces are loose, it leans back. If the laces are tight, holds forward. It does an okay job. Basically, it lets you get your leg vertical. So when you're striding, you can at least like get a straight leg rather than having forward lean pushing against you. What I find with the uphill on these is it's totally adequate for like normal stride lengths. The Hardboot setup lets you almost go to like exaggerated stride lengths that are actually, if you start getting into the science of like skimo racing and stuff, is actually more exhausting to take that big of a stride compared to what you might actually naturally stride with a soft boot. But you can get your leg vertical in these. The one thing I find with the soft boots that's challenging to overcome is you want to find a way to get your heel set in the boot snug, but not have it so tight you're cutting off circulation. So, because when you stride, if you stride too far and your calf pushes against the back of the boot here, it actually pushes your foot forward in the boot, and you'll hit your toe in the front there, especially if you have like a tight boot. So I like to ride my boots like about as small as I can get them. So I've had some challenge with that for getting heel hold good, but that's a downside. And then as far as crampon compatibility goes, this does have a heel welt and the sole is quite stiff. So having a stiff sole is an advantage for crampons, because how you'll pop a crampon is that sole will flex and you'll kind of out flex a crampon and pop it off. So having a stiff sole is good for that. But it does take away a little bit from the ride feel on the way down. So if you're like not putting crampons on your boots when you're split boarding, and you can get away with not having like a stiff split specific boot, like I totally would do that if I were you. But as you like look at the echelon of what walks really well versus what rides really well, they kind of live in opposition to each other. Like this is the best uphill, but probably my least favorite downhill. My like resort soft boots are probably my favorite downhill. These are somewhere in the middle. So stiffer sole, less board feel, but still pretty good. And holds a crampon well. I've mostly been using a strap-on crampon here that sits over the heel welt. The heel welt keeps the strap from coming down. With the automatic heel lever, I found that the boot's a little bit wide for the wires. It works, but I think I need to get the Gravel wide crampons for this boot. I'm using a pair of Petzl Irvises right now, which are like adequate. It holds a crampon. It's not as good as that for the uphill, but in general, I find it to be quite comfortable actually. And because it has this like stiffer spine here, the lateral stability for side hilling, especially if I kind of crank down the heel strap of my binding on those tricky sections, is kind of fine. Like I find I'm not falling behind my skier or hardbooter friends that much. So yeah, I mean, is it great? No, but it's totally adequate. And yeah, that's kind of the uphill experience on these boots. So now let's talk about downhill experience. For me, I've had a really terrible time getting good heel hold in hard boots. Personal experience. I know lots of people who don't have this problem. But that has to be more than just me who has this problem, because there's a reason that Phantom makes this like aftermarket ankle strap, and it's in order to create better heel hold in the boot. So people deal with this issue. And I have J-barred my liners, gotten heat molds, gotten punches, gone to professional boot fitters, done the work. And for me, it just, I cannot find something that holds my heel super well with this boot. I have tried on the Key Equipment boots before, so I know someone's going to say something about that. To me, they feel quite similar. I haven't ridden with them, but it doesn't feel like their ankle strap and the fit of their shell will do that much different for me. The shell fit feels pretty similar, which is like European ski boot shell fit, which is like kind of, for whatever reason, a baggier heel and a really tight toe box here. So I've struggled with that, and good secure foothold in your boot is paramount for getting good response out of your snowboard. And so I've always felt just like a mild lack of response with these boots in really technical terrain, where I'm like making quick, fast decisions, technical being like tight trees if they're low angle or if they're steep, or like in tight or in steep terrain as well. So I've struggled with that. Let's say you don't struggle with that. Now let's talk about what the ride experience is like with these boots. Outside of that, so most people who ride hard boots will be like, they're fine, they're pretty good. I've never heard anyone say they're great. And I think that's what it is. It's like, with this you sacrifice uphill, with this you sacrifice downhill. So they're really like, that's it, they're fine. I rode them for like 5 years. Some of like the best runs of my life have been on hard boots, but they've always made me feel a little bit, I guess, out of balance with them, or like I just don't feel like I get to ride like myself with hard boots. And so, when people talk about them being softer, well, they're talking about fore and aft here. So like the way that the link lever plays is like, you've got, fore, and you don't really have aft as like a high back. But that like forward flex is, compared to a soft boot, maybe softer, which, depending on what you want to do, is kind of helpful. But to me, it's like now my toe side turns feel like they lack a bit of response because they don't have the rigidity that this boot has. So like, yeah, I'd maybe want that to be stiffer, but where I want the boot to be softer is laterally, because that's where like we get a lot of balance and foot steering from when we're snowboarding, is being able to like tip our knees in and roll our feet and use our ankles to our advantage. And with the hard boot, the big problem is this piece of plastic here that goes behind the cuff. It's just basically the lower shell of the boot. So where the boot cuff hinges for fore and aft is like pretty similar to a soft boot, but you don't have the hinge laterally here. And so because of that, you can't tip your knees in as much, and you feel a bit more bow-legged. So people have tried to fix this with canting, and so the Phantom bindings have 5 degrees of cant. That's the most I've ever seen on the Splitboard hard boot setups. If you look at like hard boot carving setups, people will go way more. But so the cant to kind of help, and then people narrow their stance width. And what I find is the problem here is that by narrowing your stance width, you have thus reduced your stability. So you've increased your ability to turn more quickly, but if you really need to like hold an edge, it's good to be able to have like a slightly wider, slightly more athletic stance. If you look at just like resort riding, a like carving setup would have a narrow, very positive stance, which in good carvable snow is nice because you can just get the board on edge and like ride the edge, and like you can find balance in that way. If you're free riding and you're like scraping down, technical terrain, not great snow conditions, that narrow positive stance is like not great balance, and it feels like you kind of want to like tip out of it or like blow out of it. And so you want your stance a little bit wider and a little bit less positive to find better balance for that kind of terrain. And most people who are getting hard boots are trying to ride technical terrain because you're doing bigger lines with these boots. And so I find that having to narrow your stance width to help counteract this like bow-legged piece of plastic pushing against you doesn't always fix the problem. So it gets more comfortable, but then you kind of lose stability. And it's fine. Like I said, I rode many steep, aggressive lines on these boots, and it does fine. But again, I always kind of felt like I couldn't really snowboard the way I wanted to. I always felt like I kind of maybe had to slow it down or shut it down a bit more. Or if I was in trees, I couldn't like make the maneuvers as quick as I wanted to. And largely it's because you don't have those like fine motor skills anymore with your feet for steering the board. You have to use much like larger muscles and larger body movements to steer the board, which its speed is totally fine. Like its speed, yeah, you like use those bigger muscles, you're like really kind of tossing the board edge to edge, and you can only go like really fast in pretty good conditions. And so if you're in good conditions, you're riding fast, you're not going to notice it as much. But when the conditions are bad and you've got to slow it down, and even if you're trying to like ride fast in bad, or especially if you're trying to ride fast in bad conditions, not having that stability of the width and stuff like that is a hindrance to me. And so it makes just tighter terrain and poor snow conditions much harder to deal with. And so that's kind of to me, the downhill experience of the boot. Oh, and then also the like dampening thing. So these don't have a midsole. I've put like a really cushy insole in mine to try and absorb impact. But I actually don't think that the like chatter and lack of dampness from these boots comes from the lack of a midsole, as people think. I think it comes back to this piece of plastic here. And so when you hit like micro terrain features and bumps and you get kind of knocked around, you almost like ricochet off of this piece of plastic and it like knocks your leg back rather than using your body's natural suspension, because there's like suspension that's up and down, but then there's also suspension that's kind of like left and right too. And so with the soft boots, if you hit like a bad piece of snow like that, your ankle also helps with the up and down motion. So you almost kind of like flex into the boot and absorb some of the impact. Whereas this, you like get pushed into the boot and it just like pushes you right back. And so it's going to knock you off balance sooner. So yeah, in choppy, bad snow conditions, it's just a less desirable ride. So that's that. And then downhill experience on the soft boots. You know, it's soft boot. It's like what you grew up snowboarding on. And so it feels really good. And getting back to this point about this piece of plastic on the ankle here, if you look at the soft boot, you can see the stitching where there's kind of an articulation point there. And sure, that helps with like, you know, the folding the boot that way. But it also helps, especially on the inside here, with folding the boot that way. And so that's how we can kind of get that, like being able to kind of tuck our knees and foot steer and absorb chatter in that way. And so for me, on my soft boot setup, I just feel way more in balance and like I have a lot more control going through tighter terrain. I have more response for my turn initiation. If I'm like bouncing off of stuff, I feel like I'm not getting knocked out of balance. And yeah, it's just overall like a smoother riding experience, which I have come to value more than the uphill to some extent. Is I found like the downhill experience has been so improved being back on soft boots that it has like negated the uphill benefits of the hard boots for me. And then there's the midsole, so it's nice and damp, it's cushy. You know, I haven't ridden these boots at a resort, so I can't say that it's like, I can't really speak to what it's like to ride groomers on these boots compared to like my Vans boots, but my guess is it'd be probably a bit harsher comparatively. So yeah, but downhill experience overall with the soft boots is clearly the winner here. And thinking more about the downhill experience with soft boots is I can create more unique experiences with the soft boot. So if I want, so let's get these bindings here. So I'm rocking the Karakoram Primex carbons at the moment, and these have two forward lean modes. So I've got like my standard forward lean here, or 0 degree forward lean there. And so that's two different experiences I can get there. The key equipment boots do the same thing. So there is that option in hard boots. But that's kind of nice for like making low angle terrain more fun. So, I fully abide by this, and this is actually, Jeremy Jones talks about this in his Artist Alpinism book. But like where I live in Colorado, the avalanche conditions are super dangerous most of the year. So we're riding lower angle terrain most of the time. And where people like get themselves caught is they get bored with the lower angle terrain around like, this like February, March time of year. And they're like, I'm ready to like step it up to bigger terrain. Terrain's not quite ready for you to do that yet. And the persistent slab problem still exists. And that problem is or not the persistent slab problem, but like your desire to get into steeper terrain is magnified by you having a setup that's not very fun in low angle conditions. And so you have a super stiff hard boot binding, and whatever ultralight carbon stiff board you bought to go with your lightweight setup. And it's just a bear to ride that thing in the trees and in lower angle terrain. And it's not as fun. So you're like more anxious to get out of that terrain. Whereas with this setup, I can kick the high back, soften that up. And then with these I've got the different tongue stiffeners in here. So you can go no tongue stiffener. I've got the medium in right now. It's kind of my daily driver. Or there's the really stiff tongue stiffener. And so what I'll do is I'll take the tongue stiffener out and soften the boots up. And then if it's like a pow day and it's low angle pow day, I've got like this kind of like noodly kind of surf experience going on. And that's been really fun. Makes those days more novel. It makes me more creative. It makes me see the terrain in totally different ways. The other day I was like hitting side hits and like doing grabs and like tweaking grabs in the backcountry, which I haven't done in like years. It's most like something I might do at the resort, but in the backcountry I hardly ever do that anymore. So that was like really cool to just like have those feelings and sensations. And then when the time is right to go into the steep terrain, I can throw this super stiff tongue in here, and which I have done, and then you can like shred the hard stuff, which is pretty cool. So I've been really digging that from like a how to create more unique experiences out there in the backcountry, which is important for someone who's spending as many days out touring as I am. So I've been digging that about the downhill setup as well. So which one should you choose? I think that the need for hard boots in splitboarding is a bit overhyped at the moment. It's gaining a lot of traction right now. The technology's come a long way with the boots. The key boots are a step up for sure. What Phantom's doing with their hard boot bindings is great, although that being said, like what Phantom's doing with their hard boot bindings, they've been doing for like a decade now, so it's not actually that new. They just have done it really well. And so, they've got a good system going on there, and people are really into it. And I think a lot of snowboarders ride with skiers, and they're like maybe learning how to splitboard or something, and they're just like seeing their skier friends like cruise through terrain that is challenging for them. And I think part of the problem is a lot of snowboarders have no idea what it's like to hold an edge on a ski, because you've been snowboarding your whole life, so it's not a big deal. But that whole balance for like side hilling and skiing and efficiency and all of that is a bit foreign, and it takes time to learn. You kind of have to learn like really good skidding technique. And I think that with really good skidding technique, personally, the only difference I find between these two setups, if I set everything up right, is like largely the weight think. Like this just feels lighter and faster underfoot. But I can like get through terrain just as well on my soft boot bindings. I'm going to be totally honest, and I'm having no problem keeping up with my skier and hard booter friends on these setups. So, I think that it's cool that people are innovating and trying to go new directions with it, but it's also like an incredibly expensive endeavor to get into hard booting when a lot of people aren't spending that many days on their splitboard. For a lot of people, it's like a side endeavor compared to their resort riding. So maybe like 10 to 30 days a year they're on their splitboard. And most of the time they're going out like searching for POW and stuff. And I think that if you're only going to be doing that many days on your split, it's almost worth optimizing the downhill experience to some extent rather than trying to optimize the uphill. If you're like really crushing vert, really in technical terrain, and you're like really hard on your gear, then a hard boot setup might be cheaper in the long run because the hard boots are quite durable. That being said, like people have broken the shells on these boots. I've broken link levers before. They have their failure points too. It's not foolproof, but this plastic shell, all things considered, lasts longer than the soft shell does. So there's that aspect to it. But if you want to get into like technicality and like needing something for hyper technical terrain, I think it's worth actually doing the math on the amount of days per year you actually need hypercritical crampon hold. Because to me, that is like the thing that the hard boots really like outshine the soft boots on. It's like the walking and side hilling and stuff is like, yeah, sure it does, but I can get by with the soft boots. But like having like really good crampon compatibility is a big win for these. And if I look at my whole year, all the days I spend splitboarding, my season goes from November through early June sometimes. I am largely in a skin track without putting crampons on for the whole day, I think 85% of my season. And so most of the time I don't even need to have crampons in the backpack. And then the 15% of days that I'm in crampons, I would say that most of that time is spent in non-critical conditions. So booting up snow. I'm not front pointing ice. I'm not mixed climbing that often in my boots if I'm skiing. Anything that you're booting up that you're going to potentially ski down from a climbing perspective is not that steep. No matter how rad you think you are, it is. If you can ski down it from a climbing perspective, is like pretty chill. And so it's just not terrain where like you really need that like hypercritical crampon hold. And like if you have an ice axe in your hand, like a crampon popping off is not a big deal at all. Not that we should be relying on self-arrest all the time, but like you literally just plunge your ice axe in and you're stopped where you're at. So I think that most of the time it's actually like not critical crampon hold. And so like where is it critical? Like what's the 5% of the time? Here in Rocky Mountain National Park, where I live, we have these like moderate coulars that are like ice 2, ice 3, M2, M4. So there's like some mix, some ice. Maybe you're soloing it, maybe you're pitching some of it out. And to me, that's like actual tech, like you're not actually skiing that terrain when you come back down it. You'll be rappelling down that terrain. And that terrain to me is where this starts to matter a bit more. And so if you find yourself doing a bunch of that, then I think that this really could, the downsides of the descent may, be totally fine with you, so you can have that uphill security with those in those places. And the more I think what I'm going to do here soon is like with this stiff sole, this actually holds a crampon quite well. And I actually think like a good strap-on crampon with a right snug fit is even more secure than a heel welt on these boots, or like a semi-auto crampon. And I think that I'm going to maybe pick up a pair of those Gravel G10 wide crampons, put them on this and go to like the local ice cracking spot and just like go top rope and see what I can get away with, right? And see how capable these actually are, because I think that they're actually more capable than we make them out to be. And if you don't believe me, you should watch that new Jones film that came out this year, the Diable film, because there's like mountain guys from Chamonix like climbing like 5'8" in their soft boots in that film. Pretty impressive. So that film actually has done a lot to like kind of change my mind a little bit on this topic too. So yeah, do you need hard boots? I think most people don't. I think most people get away with soft boots totally fine, and they're going to have a better downhill experience, especially people who are new to splitboarding, who are not used to backcountry snow conditions yet. The like dealing with backcountry snow conditions, having a hard boot is only going to make that worse for you. I think that if you're new to splitboarding, you should not look at hard boots yet. You should be someone who has splitboarded a couple seasons at this point, and then maybe look at the hard boots. But yeah, I think ultimately, like, if you're going to carry all that weight uphill, you should have fun on the down. And most of us are going to have more fun on the down in this setup here. But if, you know, the uphill is like really where your priorities are, then go for that. I was just listening to the Tommy Delago bomb hole episode, and he says, hard boots or soft boots, if you've caught a heel edge before and overcome that learning curve, you're a snowboarder. And I agree. It's a great sentiment, right? Like, it's not the boot that makes us a snowboarder, it's the snowboard. These are two options. This is my experience with those two options. I just wanted to put like a voice out there into the world that was not the like hard boots are the answer voice, because I think that voice is getting a little bit too strong at this point. I think that this is actually a far more specialized tool than it's being made out to be at this point. And most people will benefit from just like a setup like this. So yeah, thanks for hanging out for my monologue here. I'm sure I missed some things, but if you have questions or whatever, throw them in the comments. I'm definitely not checking my comments all the time on YouTube, but I will do my best to respond and answer and talk about things as they come up. So yeah, thanks for hanging out. Those are my thoughts on this.